Welcome to Trading Day. I'm Roger Peterson. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's get to some of the stories we're following in the BNN Bloomberg newsroom. U.S. President Donald Trump says Canada lives because of the U.S. During his speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos, the American president said the U.S. is building a golden dome that is going to be defending Canada. Trump also says lots of freebies are for Canada and they should be grateful for that, but they are not. On trade, he said tariffs have radically reduced America's ballooning deficit. And in the same speech, he also said he will not use force to acquire Greenland. Trump says he is seeking immediate negotiations to discuss the acquisition of the island. However, according to Trump, no nation or group of nations is in any position to secure Greenland other than the U.S. On NATO, the U.S. president said the U.S. is being treated very unfairly by the alliance. Shares of Cenovus are up more than 4% right now after a report from Reuters that the company is considering a sale of its oil and gas assets in Alberta. According to the report, the assets are worth about $3 billion, and Cenovus is looking to cut debt after its recent takeover of MEG Energy. The report comes as the energy company sharpens its focus on its core oil sands business. And looking at the markets right now, the TSX holding on. It was up quite a bit, a lot more than this, but now it's barely into the green, up by 0.15% in the wake of Trump's speech in Davos. And the U.S. markets, similar situation. Started out the morning strong. Now you can see the NASDAQ is almost at a wash right now. S&P 500 doing not bad, up by 0.3, trying to recover from yesterday. And the Dow Jones also up by 0.4 right now. Canadian environmental services company GFL announcing today it's relocating its headquarters from Vaughan, Ontario, just north of Toronto, to Miami Beach, Florida. For more on this is the founder and CEO of GFL, Patrick Dovigi. Thank you very much for joining us, Patrick.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Why the move? Other than what we're looking at the weather outside, you're in this area, I think, right now. Are you down in Miami right now?
I'm actually in Whistler at an investor conference, at the CIBC investor conference.
Well, we're getting snow in Vaughan. So why the move down to Florida? Why the relocation of the executive headquarters?
I think when we sort of look at, being a public company, and, the availability of having, the availability to the U.S. indices and U.S. index inclusion, we just thought it was a very logical step for us to make this move. I think when you look at some of the likes of Brookfield and RB Global, and some of the rules around the S&P changes and where you're allowed to be included, I think this is a logical step given that we didn't have to actually give anything up in Canada from an index perspective. So we still have the ability to be included on the indices in Canada because we're remaining a Canadian incorporated company. But by making a slight change to, a corporate head office, that gives us the ability to get indexed on certain indices in the U.S., which opens up significant pools of capital for us as a company.
And why is that important? Do you feel all the growth that is your main growth is going to be in the U.S.?
No, I just think as we look to broaden our investor base, I think there are a bunch of pockets of capital in the U.S., and obviously the U.S. being sort of the largest capital markets pools in the world. There's multiple funds, and we have existing investors within our business today. The likes of Fidelity and Capital and others that have other pockets of capital that are more tied to indices. And I think we just have the ability to attract more pools of capital and pockets of capital from those types of investors by having index inclusion both in U.S. as well as Canada.
And did the tariffs and the uncertainty of everything that's unfolding, were those factors in it?
No, no impact because of the tariffs, et cetera. And, no change to the business in general. This is simply just a corporate head office change.
And benefit, you'll be paying taxes now on both sides. I assume you'll be paying taxes on both sides. Are there benefits to doing that?
No.
Or is that just part of doing business?
Just part of doing business. I mean, we're a Canadian incorporated company with also parts of our business that are incorporated in the U.S. We pay taxes in both countries. So again, no impact from a tax perspective on the company.
Now, any concerns for Canadians and up here investors and people who use GFL that they might get lost in this a little bit as your focus goes more and more towards the U.S. and beyond?
No one will see any change. I mean, today already 70% of our revenue comes from the U.S. Canada's been home for a long time. It's where we founded the company back in 2007. And, I think as you'll see, you're going to continue to see big green trucks rolling around Canada for a long period of time. My entire family still lives in Canada. So, I think it's just the right thing for us to do at the right time, just to attract pockets of new capital that we previously don't have in the capital structures, which should do very well for investors that continue to be invested in the name.
And have you had a chance to any expectations of how much capital you're hoping to raise, or what your plans for it, and where do you plan to direct it?
Yeah, we're not raising any incremental new capital. It's just broadening the shareholder base, and as a couple of our large shareholders exit over time, those incremental pockets of capital could be there behind to sort of pick up incremental dollars that may or may not come from them.
And why Miami for this? Are you looking south when it comes to opportunities? There's like in the southern part of the U.S. and even down into Central and South America?
Southeast has been our biggest growth trajectory over the last 3 to 4 years. I mean, as you know, the U.S. in its own rights, we're big believers in the Southeast and through the Carolinas and into the Gulf and up through the Midwest. And just, Florida is one of those states that seems to be open for business and seems to be attracting a lot of new growth from various parts of the country in the U.S., just given, political regimes and some positions taken by other states. There just seems to be an influx of population growth into the Southeast, and we just felt that was the logical place to be.
And now, obviously, there's been some volatility, shall we say, in the relationships between Canada and the U.S., and we heard Trump in his speech today say he was disappointed. He doesn't feel like Canada has paid enough respects, essentially. I guess it boils down to. Any concerns about being a Canadian company moving down there, like moving your headquarters down? I know you're already down there, but any concerns about relocating down there with the atmosphere that's going on right now?
I mean, that's the political rhetoric. But I think when you look at, I think these two countries have worked well together for a very long period of time. We've worked on both sides of the border for a long period of time. We have a great group of U.S. employees, and we have an amazing group of Canadian employees who all work really well together, and will continue to work well together, even in this, political backdrop that is playing out in the media. But I think the underlying is you have two great countries with great people in both countries that generally aligned and have very common goals. So, we still see long-term value in that as well.
Does it feel like business is business beyond all the politics with anybody you deal with down there?
Yeah, I think it's business as usual. We're in the waste business. Every day people are creating waste and generating waste. And I think, again, there's been a mutual respect between these two countries for a long period of time. And I don't anticipate that is going to change anytime soon.
And just one last about the headquarters up here. What kind of an impact on employees, people being let go, or people moving down to Florida?
No, I mean, our largest hubs today are in Vaughan and in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is more focused on sort of corporate executives. So, I mean, we're talking about, 12 to 15 individuals that are moving south. We still employ, thousands of people in Canada. I think today our Canadian headcount is north of 10,000 individuals, and none of those jobs are going anywhere.
And are you bringing Canadian executives down, and will you still be looking to try and recruit Canadians to come down and work for you?
Yeah, of course. I mean, again, the lion's share of the executive team is Canadian today. We have a mixture of U.S. Executives as well, which will relocate as well. But listen, whoever's best fit for the job will continue being employed, and we'll get the jobs.
Okay, Patrick, thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Patrick Dovigi is founder and CEO of GFL Environmental. Well, U.S. President Donald Trump said Canada lives because of the U.S. We discussed what his World Economic Forum speech means for Canada after the break. right, U.S. President Donald Trump's speech at Davos earlier today only briefly mentioned Canada. Trump saying Canada lives because of the U.S. and should be grateful to them, adding that Canada gets a lot of freebies from the States. To discuss this further, we're joined now by Sergio Marchi, the former Canadian Minister of International Trade and former ambassador to the World Trade Organization. And Sergio, thank you very much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Sorry for interrupting. Thank you again. Let's get your thoughts on the speech itself, just overall.
Well, yesterday, I thought that our prime minister delivered a very candid, astute, and thoughtful address on the rapidly changing world order, as he described it. And that's not just my take. I think if you look at all the commentators, overwhelmingly, they all thought that the prime minister made a formidable speech laying out a very coherent vision and strategy. And so today in comes Donald Trump, and what does he say? As you reported at the outstart, he kind of goes back to his same old condescending, arrogant comment saying that we only exist because of the United States and that we're not grateful enough. And so it was so banal, no intelligent contribution to the global discourse whatsoever, just a fat zero, which means that it will be easily and quickly dismissed as irrelevant.
But is it irrelevant? I mean, he had that comment for the prime minister. I mean, and as much as we want to look at trade elsewhere in the world, the reality is we are still tied to the U.S., at least for now and at least for a while. How does the prime minister walk that line between looking strong and looking like independent? But also the reality is they're our neighbors and we have to work with them.
Yeah, and that goes for them as well. Trump keeps repeating that they don't need anything from Canada, which is just hogwash. They need many products that we have, and all you have to do is ask American businesses what they would do if the border was shut down by this dictator. So, and we've been a good law-abiding neighbor. We buy more products from them than any other country. Canadians flock or used to flock to their beaches during winter. We fought alongside American soldiers in every battle together and spilled blood together. On 9/11, all the rerouted planes and passengers came to Canada, Newfoundland specifically. And you can go on, but that's not enough for the Donald, because what he expects is every leader in every country to genuflect. And I don't think Carney should play that game. Now, Carney has been sensitive to our needs and our interests, and he's tried to cooperate with Donald Trump. But yesterday, I think he not only talked about Canada, but he talked about how like-minded countries have to come together publicly and rebuke this bullying. Otherwise, if he takes us on individually, he can actually win.
Now, we saw Trump back off on Greenland, or at least say that they just want to have negotiations without saying about the tariffs or anything like that. Should we be concerned about a similar concept with Canada, him marching in? I mean, they showed that map with him where he put an American flag over Canada and Mexico. And I know he loves just to get people spinning, and he does a great job at it. But should we be legitimately concerned?
Well, I think we should always keep our guard up. I think we should keep our eyes open. The problem with Donald Trump is that he changes on a dime, and you just can't trust his word. That has become abundantly clear. So when he goes to Davos today, as he did, and says, look, I'm not going to use force in Greenland, do people believe him? Do people trust him? In other words, are people going to go on other issues and forget about what he said before? Not at all, because tomorrow morning, once he's back in Washington, he can say the very opposite. Or you can have soldiers tomorrow morning showing up despite what he told people in Davos. So, of course, you have to keep your eyes open when you deal with someone who double speaks.
Now, Trump has, I believe, 5 or 6 bilats at the World Economic Forum, but Carney's already on his way out from Switzerland. Yes. What does that tell you, or can we read into it at all?
Well, I think the prime minister has other business at hand. I mean, he's got a full cabinet meeting in the next day or two. Macron left because he's got his business. You can read into it that after yesterday's speech, the last thing Prime Minister Carney wanted to do is listen to Donald Trump's rhetoric. So I think it's just as good that he had other pressing business. I mean, Donald Trump didn't come to hear Carney, so what's good for us is also good for him.
And we're heading into Kuzma soon. Where do you think that will go with where they stand, the two of them right now?
It's very unpredictable. Like I said, he changes his mind and his views almost on an hourly basis. Initially, he says, we're going to negotiate a good deal. I want to help Canada. His musings in the last 2 weeks is, we don't need Kuzma, but I know Canada does. He goes after Mexico as well. So you just don't know where you stand. I think we prepare for the worst and then see how things unfold. But in the meantime, our prime minister is just not taking this sitting down. He's been crisscrossing the world, recreating stronger bonds, creating new relationships, new trading, new investment. And I think yesterday's speech confirmed that while we wait for Trump to get his act together, we are getting ours on the road and assuming the worst, which is what you need to do with a figure like Trump.
Okay, Sergio, thank you very much for joining us today.
You're very welcome.
Sergio Marque is the former Canadian Minister of International Trade and the former ambassador to the World Trade Organization. And U.S. President Donald Trump says he won't use force to take Greenland. We discuss what this means for the Arctic region right after the break. U.S. President Trump's latest tariff threats created market turmoil, with several stock indices in New York plummeting by the most in a single day since last October. But in Canada, the stock market fared better, in part because of gold, which reached another record high, surging amid the uncertainty. Now, for more on this, CTV's John Venevali-Rao filed this report.
So this is the 1 ounce gold Canadian maple leaf.
Justin Yampolsky showed us a typical 1 ounce gold coin that just today shot up in value more than $100, with Donald Trump's threats adding to gold's shine in a huge way.
It was really showing how economically uncertain the entire world is. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Everybody is kind of hedging their bets, and everybody just wants security, however they can find it.
Precious metals are seen as a safe haven in times of turmoil, and Trump creating plenty of that, with gold surging past $4,700 an ounce for the first time ever.
We've reached numbers a lot quicker than I would have expected.
After a stunning 66% rise last year, gold is already up more than 9% in the month of January. In part, central banks have been buying it as countries pivot away from the U.S. dollar.
Stocks are still sharply lower, but they're off the worst level.
And today, investors were selling U.S. stocks, markets down sharply, what some called the Sell America trade. While Toronto's main index fared better, in part because gold mining stocks were on the rise. Canada is the fourth largest gold producer in the world, behind China, Russia, and Australia. In northern Ontario, the Madsen gold mine started up operations again just last year under new ownership. It was closed for decades when the price of gold was low and now employs 280 people.
It's a very exciting time for Canadian gold miners, for sure. I mean, it's fun to be mining gold when a gold bull market is on.
A gold boom that's driving more investment in Canadian mines and boosting the value of Canadian exports.
As for gold's strong run, some bank analysts believe it could hit $5,000 US an ounce by the end of the year. John Venevali-Rao, CTV News, Toronto.
Well, during his speech at the World Economic Forum, U.S. President Trump said he wouldn't use force to take Greenland. However, he also said only the U.S. can actually protect Greenland. To talk more about what this means for security in our Arctic and the Arctic in general and Canada's role in it, we're joined now by Ken Coates, a distinguished fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. Ken, thanks very much for joining us.
Oh, delighted to be with you.
Your thoughts on the Arctic and what Trump had to say about it in his speech today. Is it realistic what he was talking about?
I'll be honest, it's really hard to find out what's realistic about what President Trump is saying these days. It's so inconsistent and so disconnected from sort of reality. You have an interesting situation where the United States basically had all the opportunities to do whatever it wanted in Greenland for decades, really going back to World War II. And they actually had many more armed forces bases there 25 years ago, and they closed a whole bunch of them down. So there's lots of different ways in which Greenland could be protected, and which the NATO alliance could be supported. Trying to figure out what Donald Trump's end game is very, very difficult. All we know is that there's considerable sort of uncertainty. You could call it chaos if you wanted, but certain political uncertainty, and people are really struggling to make head or tails out of sort of what he actually has in mind.
Now, is Greenland that vital, and is our North then? I mean, it's essentially almost one and the same, or is this all about minerals and other things like that?
I think it's primarily about sort of minerals, but it's also about sort of big marks on the map. It's going back to almost the 19th century, a time when European countries were sort of carving up the world and carving up Africa and Asia and places like that and creating whole new countries and big colonies. You have a sense that there's some sort of territorial aspirations here that are really hard to figure out, to be honest. But I think the mineral parts are really important. But I think this is where the stuff with Canada sort of comes in. The Canadian Arctic is not Canada's hotspot. Canada's hotspot is actually the subarctic. There's good resources in the Arctic. Not what we thought there would be. We thought one time there'd be lots of oil and natural gas up there, and it turned out to be much smaller. There are some mineral deposits that are very expensive to get out of the ground, so you have to have really super high quality products like they have at Baffin Land and Edgeo Eagle and places like that. So it isn't so much the Arctic we should be talking about. We should be looking about the provincial north, the northern Manitoba, northern Ontario, northern Quebec, British Columbia, Alberta. The northern Saskatchewan has some of the largest uranium deposits in the world. So it's actually the subarctic that's actually should be our focus. And I think I always find the Arctic stuff to be a little bit of a distraction. It's sort of, pointing our directions way up north because we're kind of nostalgic about it. And we have very romantic notions about the Inuit and about the far north. We can do better in the Arctic for sure. But I think we have to really make some good sense out of what our defensive strategy is for all of Canada, including the 50% of the country that's in the subarctic. That's where our resource future actually rests.
Now, is there a realistic expectation we could actually defend our country against if the Americans chose to invade?
No. If they decided to invade, we would be very, very weak very quickly. We sort of have to admire what Ukraine has done against Russia, but I'm not so sure we'd last a couple of weeks. And even the Prime Minister has indicated that he's concerned about that. But the question is, who are you defending against? If you're defending against the United States, we'd have to spend our entire GDP on defense and have half of our young people serving in the armed forces. That's not going to be likely and not going to happen at all. But can we protect it better? The answer is absolutely yes. We could have more Arctic submarines. We could have better sensor systems in the far north. We can not let the debate about airplanes and fighter jets be transformed almost overnight from a conversation about what would we need militarily, we've known for 20 years, into a conversation about Canadian industrial policy. Now let's bring in a different fighter, and maybe we'll get Saab to come over, and we'll get more industrial plants and get some more economic benefits out of it. That's a terrible thing to do. You have to defend the North with the best equipment you possibly can, to provide the right surveillance against any enemies. And I think over time the Americans will be less of a threat. We're never going to go back to sort of thinking of them as our best friends forever. But we also have to have much more control over what the Russians are doing in the far north, what the Chinese might be interested in doing, and protecting NATO interests. We should be looking at how we can defend Greenland should anything happen to Greenland. And I think there are more technological solutions than there are, sort of old style military boots on the ground kind of an approach. But in Canada so far, we haven't moved along that line very quickly. We've actually been talking about it for years, and we haven't done very much. So I'm still looking for a sign that we're actually going to do something different.
And I just want to ask: are you up north right now? I can see some brightness in the windows. It could be snow, but are you right up north right now?
I'm not. I'm actually down on the Vancouver Island, but I'm actually heading up north very shortly.
Okay.
And it's an interesting to go up there because you'll discover how completely undefended it is. You know, we have no military presence outside of Yellowknife, and that's a massive amount of country, more than half of Canada's landscape, and almost no presence except the Canadian Arctic Rangers.
All right. I think everybody should take a trip up there. Ken, thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate it. Drive safe.
You're more than welcome. Take care.
Ken Coates is a distinguished fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. Coming up, shares of Netflix are down today as analysts are disappointed by the streaming company's guidance. We'll break it all down when we come back. Shares of Netflix are trading lower after the company posted weaker earnings guidance than expected. Our next guest says its results were good, but the 2026 forecast is what was disappointing. Let's get more from Matthew Dolan, senior equity analyst at Morningstar. Matthew, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, what was the most disappointing part of this then?
Well, probably the margins and the free cash flow guidance for 2026 were the most disappointing. But to us, the thing that was really confirmed was that the revenue is slowing down. And so that was probably, well, at the midpoint, a little bit below what the street was expecting. But it seems that the ability for Netflix to deliver the type of sales growth that the street has gotten accustomed to, and that its internal targets say that it's shooting for, is probably not realistic given how saturated the U.S. market is.
And so where does it leave it then heading into 2026?
Well, at this point, the stock is finally looking fairly valued to us because Netflix is still a very strong company, still the leader in its space by far. It just seems that the market kind of needed a reset and to have a little bit more realistic expectations. Netflix still guided for margin expansion. And by the way, the expansion it guided to wasn't as bad as it looked because there are some costs due to the Warner Brothers acquisition. So that's not really the core business. The free cash flow guidance that was light in part was because of timing issue on some tax payments from Brazil, and also because content spending is going to be higher, which it needs to be in our view, especially after having last year not risen very much. So these are healthy things and part of a great, strong business. It's just not a hyper growth story with kind of infinite growth that it almost seemed the market was pricing in earlier last year, and now things have kind of settled down and are much more sober in our view.
And how much is Warner or the negotiations with Warner weighing on everything? It's been going back and forth with Paramount. How much of is that a factor at all?
It sure seems like it is a factor. I don't think that's the only thing, and I think part of this saga that is going on, or even just the initiative to go and acquire, attempt to acquire that, just brings to light, and again, brings some of that realism about what Netflix's core business is and what the opportunities are. And so although the initial hit on the stock probably was directly related to the amount they're planning to put out for Warner Brothers, I think the decline has become exacerbated by the view that Netflix doesn't have the type of growth that it had before in its future on an organic basis. And so I think it's the combination of those two things that have weighed on the stock so heavily over the last 3 or 4 months.
And of course, I mean, content is king. And if the Warner deal at best it looks like it may take possibly a couple of years, but if it happens at all, and if it doesn't happen, they have to find their content. What kind of options would they have? Would they have to spend more on content, or would they look to buy somebody else?
I don't expect them to spend much more than, let's say, the rate that they're growing at now in terms of their content spending. So let's say mid-single-digit growth maybe every year in content spending. That happens probably with or without Warner, really, although with Warner, there's a huge wrench in things. I don't necessarily expect they're going to look to buy someone else if they don't get Warner. They claim this is kind of a not once in a lifetime, but a very unique asset, and that is true. And so I would actually hope that they don't stretch to find something else. But of course, even Warner Brothers, well, in our view, they're paying too much for it. And so although it will bring really important content and will make Netflix's offering library more robust, better, and at lower cost, at least on an annual operating basis, they're putting out, first of all, that huge amount to get it. And second of all, it kind of detracts from what the current HBO Max streaming platform is. And if you fold that in, then you have some, we would say, revenue dis-synergies there, where you're kind of getting 1 + 1 = less than 2. And so it's not that I think Netflix is in a bad spot. I think they're in a good spot, really, either way. I think investors just need to get used to the fact that it's not going to grow like it did before. And with a reset in the stock, which we think we've now had, you're kind of at a level where you can look at Netflix maybe just in a different way than you did before and have different expectations. And it doesn't mean that it's not a great company and has bright prospects on its own and really with or without Warner.
And what about from advertising? How is that coming together and how is it looking?
Yeah, it's still a small base, and Netflix is growing it well. So they said in 2025, advertising revenue was $1.5 billion, which is really only about 3% of total revenue. They said that was up 2.5 times from the prior year. This is really the first time Netflix has offered any concrete numbers around what it's doing in ad revenue, and they expect it to double in 2026. But if you're still only looking at $3 billion, it's not a huge contributor yet. And our view has just always been that growing advertising revenue is great, but there is an offset if you have more subscribers on that lower priced ad supported model. And so there is no free lunch. Advertising revenue is built into the growth forecast of us and of the street, certainly. And we expect it to be high. And so it's operating well, but it's not maybe the savior or the hidden gem that, that some might hope.
Okay, we'll leave it there, Matthew, but thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Matthew Dogan is Senior Equity Analyst at Morningstar. Coming up, it's Bell Let's Talk Day, and we're talking to Caitlin Morrison, Executive Director of Matthew Perry House, about the $49 billion impact of addition in Canada. Stick around for that conversation. Matthew Perry House is a Canadian nonprofit dedicated to supporting individuals as they rebuild their lives after addiction treatment, now created to honor the legacy of the late beloved Canadian actor, and their mission to mitigate the social and economic impact of addiction in Canada. Joining us now on Bell Let's Talk Day is Caitlin Morrison, Perry's younger sister and Executive Director of Matthew Perry House. Caitlin, thank you very much for joining us today.
Roger, thank you for having me.
Let's talk a little bit about what Matthew Perry House hopes to accomplish, what their goal is for each person who comes in there looking for help.
Well, that's a wonderful question, and it really depends. When we're talking about the house itself, the sort of physical space, we're looking at people who are coming into in crisis. They would typically be seeking treatment. Typically, they have lives that have been really impacted financially and socially by substance use, and they really need a tremendous amount of support, not just to to get to the other side of the physical aspects of substance addiction, but also to figure out a way to get back to living in a world that is productive and prosperous. But we also do work outside of that physical house structure, and what we attempt to do there is to encourage people to assess their own substance use health, assess their relationship with substances, and see if it's something that is beginning to impede their lives, impede their productivity, prevent them from attaining the kind of success both in life and professionally that they're trying to achieve. And we're hoping that, overall, from a human perspective, this kind of thing will save a lot of lives. And from a financial perspective, you mentioned before the break, $49 billion a year in cost is extraordinary. And it would be much better to invest in making sure that Canadians are prosperous and healthy, I think, than to lose money to the opposite.
Well, and that's what I think is part of the. We don't talk, I think, as much about the financial impact, but people lose everything, and you can help them get rid of the habit, but you still have to help them get going again because a lot of them have lost everything, and from all economic strata.
That's absolutely right. So it is about helping to facilitate getting back into putting all the pieces back together, and also avoiding something that happens to far too many Canadian families, which is a cycle of treatment and return to crisis and treatment again. I have talked to far too many parents, loved ones, spouses who are on their third mortgage and they want to try to get a fourth one to send somebody for support again, but they're also not really sure if it's going to do anything this time. And that's another thing that is impacting families across the country, and we hope can be solved by a more all-inclusive, longer-term support system.
You mentioned about talking to people, trying to catch them earlier, essentially, I mean, is what that boils down to before the problem becomes the problem, because a lot of people can say, well, I'm fine, I just go out and have a good time or whatever, and that's it, and I'm with it. But how can coworkers approach that, or companies, how do they deal with something like that? It has to be a difficult situation and delicate.
Yeah, it's a delicate situation, and I mean, substance use is very much embedded into our culture and corporate culture. I mean, you go to events, conferences, corporate evening things, and typically alcohol is a big part of that. There are substances everywhere, and people tend to think of substances as celebratory, and it often is when the relationship with them is healthy. But for those for whom it isn't healthy, I was talking to somebody the other day, and I won't give too many details about them because I don't want anyone to know who they are, but they were talking about the fact that they've been thinking about pursuing, sobriety, pursuing getting rid of alcohol specifically in their lives, but it's very difficult because every time they go to an event, they're expected to have a drink in their hand. And so figuring out a way to include those who choose to not drink in that same celebratory culture, I think would be a great move for businesses to make. And being open to people asking for help before, maybe their job isn't being impacted yet, but saying, look, as an employee, if you think that there's something in your life that is impacting your ability to be the best possible employee that you can be, we want to help you get support. Well, that support is still maybe it's a therapy session once a week before it's something that's more costly and more long-term and more of a crisis.
Okay, Caitlin, thank you very much for joining us today and sharing that with us. We appreciate it.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Caitlin Morrison is Executive Director of Matthew Perry House. Still ahead, we'll bring you the latest from Davos with Lindsay Biscaya.
Tonight,
we just got situated in our room.
Just hours after this video, she was found beaten to death on a luxury resort in Mexico.
When I found out she was dead, I just started screaming.
Her Canadian boyfriend found not guilty.
My goal is that the monster who murdered my daughter doesn't have a chance to murder anybody else's.
We've uncovered blockbuster developments that could change everything. Tonight on CTV National News and ctvnews.ca.
continue to track reaction to U.S. President Donald Trump's speech in Davos this morning. Now the EU has paused the approval of a trade deal with the U.S. For more on this, we're joined by BNN Bloomberg's Lindsay Biscaya. Never a dull moment, Lindsay.
It's never a dull moment. So we knew that there was some tension between the EU and the U.S. ever since the weekend when Donald Trump threatened to impose new 10% tariffs on goods coming from 8 different European nations. And today we are hearing from the chairman of the European Parliament's International Trade Committee. I believe we have a post that was posted on social media just a couple hours ago. He announced today that they are going to pause that approval of this deal. You can see this post now. He said that until the U.S. decides to re-engage on a path of cooperation rather than confrontation, no steps forward will be made. So the core of this deal was a cap on U.S. tariffs of European imports at 15%. Remember, it was signed last year, and it was like one of the best deals, I guess, for a country with the U.S. so far.
One of the biggest,
One of the biggest, yeah. But all of that has now changed because of these tariff threats that Trump imposed on Saturday, I believe, and they're still hanging. And it's all because of Greenland, right? Because these European nations have said that they oppose the U.S.'s plan to control Greenland. And so that's the latest there. But in terms of what we saw today from Donald Trump, when he spoke at Davos in Switzerland, he did talk about Greenland. It took him a while to get there. The speech was an hour.
A half hour, if I'm not
minutes.
mistaken, was when he first mentioned it.
Yeah, it was like 30 minutes in. So we did eventually get there, and he knew that everyone was waiting for that, right? But he talked about Greenland, saying once again that the U.S. Is going to be seeking immediate negotiations to acquire Greenland. He said this is not a threat to NATO, but the U.S. needs to have Greenland. Here's more on what he had to say in his speech today.
But now what I'm asking for is a piece of ice, cold and poorly located, that can play a vital role in world peace and world protection. It's a very small ask compared to what we have given them for many, many decades. But the problem with NATO is that we'll be there for them 100%. But I'm not sure that they'd be there for us. If we gave them the call, gentlemen, we are being attacked. We're under attack by such and such a nation. I know them all very well. I'm not sure that they'd be there.
So that clip you're hearing, that was the second time he brought up Greenland, right? Because 30 minutes into that speech, he talked about Greenland, moved on to other things, but then came back to Greenland. So you can tell that that's on his mind right now. He kept saying, we want that piece of ice. And he said the world has a choice. He said, quote, you can say yes, and we will be very appreciative, or you can say no, and we will remember.
Oh, and he remembered something else, too.
He did.
Prime Minister Carney's speech.
Yes. Prime Minister Carney gave that speech yesterday. We were all waiting to see what reaction to it would be, because it was really about middle powers standing up to the U.S. and taking a stand. And yes, Donald Trump did remember. He mentioned Canada, not for a very big part of his speech, but he did say that he was listening to that yesterday. He told Mark Carney that he was not respectful. He said Canada has not been respectful. And he says, quote, Canada gets a lot of freebies. They should be grateful, but they're not. He said that, quote unquote, Mark was not grateful in that speech yesterday. And he was listening, wasn't very appreciative of it, but then he moved on to many other topics throughout his speech. But it was interesting to hear a little bit of feedback in terms of that speech yesterday, because it was a big one. He got a standing ovation, Mark Carney did, and a lot of people are looking at Canada now as one of the leaders on this.
Yeah, and he really hasn't said much about Canada with our deal with China. He kind of shrugged and went, meh. And then this one, there was a veiled threat in there about
There's
the
some
Prime Minister.
quiet threats going
Mark,
on right now.
What is it, Mark? You better be careful next time. Is that what he said? Or
It was something like that. We will remember quotes like this, and we've heard that after that deal with China as well. Like Donald Trump was pretty flippant about it, but there was other members of his team saying this could be problematic in the future.
And of course, Christmas coming up.
Yes.
Fun times.
Yes.
All
So
right.
fun.
All right. And it's January, the third week of January.
I know. It's hard to believe.
Thank you for that. That was BNN Bloomberg's Lindsay Biscaya. Well, that wraps up this edition of Trading Day. Thank you very much for joining us. Have yourself a great afternoon.